A Sankarshan Joshi trip.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Sankarshan Joshi trip. This episode is really special one. I've been waiting for this episode for quite some time. On this episode, we have the CEO and the founder of Consumer. We have Abhilash Madabushi. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Hey man, thank you so much for doing this, for making this happen finally.
Thanks for having me, Sankarshan. I think, yeah, like you said, we've been waiting a long time for this, but I mean, it's worth the wait. Hopefully, this episode. Huh?
You are the first guest who I've been planning for like months. Like, so we talked about doing this probably 6 months back, and
Yep.
6 months to 8 months back, I guess. But like, we are finally doing this. So
Exciting, man. I think, I mean, like you always say, right? Every time we talk, it's like a podcast episode. We talk for hours on end. So
yeah,
makes sense that one of them at least we convert into a viewing for others as well.
yes. So for all the listeners who don't know what Consumer is and who you are, could you do the honors for, and like tell them
Sure.
about it?
So I'm Abhilash, like you said, I'm the founder of Consumer. So Consumer is a AI company where we build a market intelligence platform powered by cutting edge artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques. And we're still an early stage startup. We're funded by PVL, which is an incubator based out of PS University. And so we are basically trying to use technology to make sense of the vast amount of information that's available on the net. So today's consumer insights, right? I mean, every business needs insights to run. People want to understand how consumers behave, want to understand why do people purchase the things they purchase. Because let's say you go to a shop, there are thousands of different products. Or let's say, simple example, you take coffee. You have 5 different brands of coffee in front of you, 5 different types, styles, this, that. So what makes you buy A over B, right? That sort of purchase decisions. So today's world, I mean, until today, people used to look at methods like surveys, focus groups, going through research to identify these insights, to find out why consumers behave the way they behave. But the fact remains that today it's very difficult to find someone to sit with you for half an hour to do a consumer survey. It's very difficult to find people to sit for a focus group. And these insights are still very micro scale, very narrow. But today, the most organic insights are found on social media, are found on Amazon reviews, are found on places online rather than offline physically. So let's say I buy a product from a renowned store and I don't like it. My rant will either be on social media or on the reviews page. My rant will not be to his rep, customer service rep, who comes and asks me for feedback, or a researcher from XYZ organization who comes and asks me for a focus group. So for us to better understand consumers in the 21st century, we need to make sense of this data, which is a gold mine today, which nobody is doing. So that is where Consumer came in, where luckily, thanks to the advancements in technology so far, right? It's not that we have come in and built something which is out of the blue. It's thanks to the work of people and researchers from a long time, where natural language processing, text processing, speech processing has come to the level where we can actually apply it to even better applications. So the timing was absolutely right for us to say that, hey, let's take advantage of these technologies, build and improve these technologies and innovate here to try and accustom them to this use case. So that's how Consumer came about, that how do we solve this problem? In fact, you would know that we tried going through the manual route itself, right? We tried that, let's see what research takes us. And we failed in a very good way, that we understood that manual methods are not the way forward. We need to make a leap in the tech, leap of faith, and use this technology to try and make sense of data online. So that's what we do, that's who I am.
You know what? Like, I've been a part of this company. Like, initially, I was one of the designers, right? Like, I designed the interfaces
Right.
just to give context to people to, or like where I come
Full
from.
disclosure.
Yeah, like there are two things that I love about Consumer. Okay, ever like since inception, this is what I love about Consumer, and you being the CEO and like you taking all the decisions that you take. First is the problem that is addresses. So everybody wants to be a businessman and everybody wants to come up with some sort of idea and some sort of product, right? Like now, being a
Right.
CEO, having a startup is like a trend right now. But they
Correct.
marry the idea so much that they don't really put in efforts to understanding the consumer. Like, what are the behaviors? Will my product actually sell? Be very rational about this problem. Will it solve?
Right.
And consumer is solving that, right? Like you're helping all the all the businessmen or like anybody who wants to do anything. They can check if a certain feature or check an idea fits well with the consumer, like how will it be applicable, or like how are the trends going. So first is the problem that you guys trying to address. I really love that. And the second is the decisions that you take as the CEO of the company, the pivots that you have to make. You love the problem and not the solution. So usually what happens is people like any young businessman, they love what they're doing, they put in so much effort, so they don't want to change. So they try to change the problem but not what they've designed. So I have seen like initially when consumers started, how you wanted to tackle the problem was completely different from what it is now, right? Like you had to go through so many pivots. And I think, like, yeah, these are the two things that I love about consumer.
Thanks. Yes, I think one thing which you said at the first point itself, that people fall in love with the solution. I think that applies in both places. That building something is not enough. Building something for someone to do something. That's the entire definition of entrepreneurship. So, having built something, I feel again we haven't. I wouldn't claim that we have built the right thing yet until we get some market, pull in the market. But from the base theory, we know that it doesn't work unless your consumers want it, right? And making something that they want is important. Now, why we wanted to solve this problem is more because of the fact that people don't understand, or they're see there are two major areas where insights help you, right? One is to validate what you already think, like you said, right? I already think that my consumers might want this. I validate it by telling you that yes, your consumers are also talking about this. Whereas the second point is more from a creative point of view. I tell you something you don't know, that let's say consumers want something like this, and that inspires you to innovate, to improve, to problem solve, so that your consumers are happy. So I'll give you an example, right? When we work with Amazon, we did some stuff for coffee machines. Now, when we did some review analysis of coffee machines, we found that people were very, very unhappy with glass coffee machines, right? They were unhappy with the glass as the material made, and they were very happy with steel, stainless steel, and metal-based products. And that was a very easy reason, that it was breaking a lot. So when we present this insight to any client, let's say makes coffee machines, it enables them to make a better decision making on their end. Glass looks good, it sounds good, but it's also extremely expensive. And as you know, once you start a manufacturing process, you need a minimum, lot size to manufacture. So that is a huge investment they're making, and making that investment without wondering whether the consumer is on board could potentially deal to a loss, right? So if I tell you this problem, I give you this point that people are talking about this specific in a negative way. People don't like glass, they like metal. It would help you. And the second one, when I talked about creativity comes, I'll give you an example for that as well. When we did it for, I think, a snacks-based company, what we found is that people are very concerned about the facility where it's being manufactured. So we were looking at traditional snacks, and what we found is that consumers, the critical point or the critical factor behind a purchase decision was one of the critical factors was that where is the facility that this is being manufactured? What is the cleanliness? Can I have photos? Can I see the staff? The reason being that these are like homemade snacks or traditional snacks where you want cleanliness as one of the major important goals. So when we present this to someone, a potential client could look at it in such a way that, okay, people are looking at facility as a critical factor. I may need to, maybe just put a simple website page up that this is my facility, these are the amenities, this is the cleanliness. You can go to even more creative levels where people think of it in different creative ways to show that my facility is good. So not only do we help you validate what you're thinking of, we also want to foster that creativity in you by giving you a problem to solve that we know, and we can guarantee that the customers will be happy if you solve it. So it's basically like your tool that can help you as a product manager, brand manager, entrepreneur, CEO, whoever you are, improve your value to your customer, tenfold. That's the vision on what we're building.
Yeah. In a way, you guys were revolutionizing how customer feedback or like customer data company will get and how they'll use it. So, like you said right earlier, they would do like focus groups and they would do like research. They would
Right.
have a team who would do. And I come from design background, right? And that's what we do. Like for any project that we want to work on, like first we do the
Right.
market research. We go through all the data, and then we do primary research where we talk to the stakeholders, we interview them, we send out surveys. First, that is expensive because it requires a lot of people, like a lot of employees and a lot of time. So when a
Correct.
company has something like your platform, right, they would save a lot of resources and they would be getting better data, because sometimes what the consumer tell might be completely different from what they do, right? So data never lies, right? So when you look at their data, subconsciously there are certain choices that they are making, and you guys are picking on that, right? Like you guys are picking on that, which would help the business.
Exactly. And coming back to that point, right? Again, I'm not saying that you don't need to do any research on your own. In fact, we can help you do better research, because let's say you're sending out a survey, and even if cost is not a problem, let's say you're a big brand, cost is never a problem for you. So what questions to ask itself is starts from there, right? I'll give you an insight where you can decide what question to ask. So let's say in snacks, we found that salty snacks for certain, I don't know if you heard of Kodubale, they're a certain,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
traditional Karnataka snacks. So that people are talking about salty snacks they liked, spicy they didn't like, let's say, right? That's sort of an example. Now that is a potential question you can put forward to your customers, right?
Hmm.
If that insight was not enough to you on its own, we are telling you on a big thing. If you still want to do your research, this is an important factor for you to do your research on. So it's, again, I mean, corner case, use case, but what basically, like you said, it sums it up well, is that we help you find those insights from the data which you don't have, right? So it'll help you a lot with that sort of application.
Yeah. Even though there are a lot of fascinating things about what you do, the like more than your company and the idea, you as a person fascinate me. Like there are a lot of things about you that I admire. And like I tried starting a startup. So like I had this one idea with a friend of mine. We wanted to do something which was like few years back, like 3 4 years back probably. And when I look back, I know how dumb I was and how strong my dumb perceptions were. So like when I look at you, right, the one thing that strikes me is it is not easy to do what you're doing, because like you are young. I mean, like you are younger than me, and like with the people that you work with, they are they're older to you, right? Like some are probably like 5 6 years older to you. But
Right.
your management skills, right? Like there are so many resources, there are people who are developing, there are people who are marketing, there are so many resources that like consumer has, and you being at the center of it and you coordinating with everybody and you managing it so like so peacefully, like I've seen it like I mean, I don't think peaceful is the right word, but without any chaos. Like you manage it so well, and that's one thing that I admire the most about you, honestly.
So there's always, I mean, thanks first of all, Sankarshan, I think, being too kind, but there's always chaos. It's just that if you filter the chaos and streamline the chaos, it's kind of my job to ensure you don't fall into the chaos, right? So it comes from simple things, right? If I have, like you said, we have different domains. You are not required as a designer to sit for a marketing domain or marketing call. So the marketing chaos, it's just about diverting the chaos into different directions. Whatever issues we have with regards to design and maybe product would come to you, but or to my design team, but the rest would go to my engineering team, or the rest would go to my marketing team. And I've been blessed again by PVL, and thanks to the funding and the environment I'm in, to have the resources at my disposal that tomorrow we need to do this. We have people there that I can, I don't need to worry about the hiring problem and getting people on board. We have resources available which we can, readily access. So that helps in reducing the chaos, because when you help people compartmentalize the work which is relevant to them only, right, you don't need to stress about the other problems which I'm having. So in a way, like you said, I think that is one of the core responsibilities when you have a team, is to ensure that the team is able to work without a roadblock. In fact, most of my time when we are developing a product within an engineering team itself would be spent on ensuring that people don't trip over each other. That means if person A requires some deliverable from person B, we have to ensure that person B doesn't become a roadblock in this, or I don't become a roadblock in this. And right, as an entrepreneur, at least in the early stage, the idea is mine, the concept is mine, the thoughts are mine, which means everything's in my head, which means I will be required in multiple places at the same time. If you want to design something, the only guy who can answer your doubt will be me. And being a solo founder, that means I am the data resource repository, you can say, right? So me as a human being, I need to ensure there in the team, I am not the roadblock. So if you require some work to be done, you need to be able to, I need to be able to be accessible or work async so that you get it. So like you said, right, there is always chaos, but streamlining it is very important. Coming to the other point of, how we handle a company, right? Like you said, in terms of how you start, how you grow, how you pivot, how you scale. I think, again, we're very, very early stage, right? We're not yet the unicorn we want to be. But what we learn is that if you give it enough of a shot, right, you give it a chance, and you keep working, iterating with an open mind. It's very important to have an open mind. If you're stuck on the idea that this is what I want to build and I don't care what the user says, then it's very difficult to change. I mean, you need to be very, very open to change. And I know a lot of people who, when they work and they build something, they're like, this is it, right? This is my built version. I am done with it, right? Get it out there, sell it. But you always need to iterate, always need to be willing to listen to the people outside who are important, right? Give it a shot in your mind. At the end of the day, it's your mind to decide yes or no. But making those decisions, you can only make the right decisions when you have the right information to make the right decisions. So give it a shot to get that information. And then when you make the decision, you'll still make a lot of wrong decisions, but hopefully the right ones overshadow those. Right? So it's as simple as that.
Why I admire that was because, like, when I gave my example that I started a business few years back, I was literally lacking that. I was lacking two things. One is managing the chaos. The two is I didn't know what I didn't know. So even like it's always important to know what you don't know, right? So that you can put efforts into learning that. I feel like few years back, like even when I was doing my bachelor's and now that I'm graduated, my confidence level was like way higher back then than it is now, because then I didn't know what I didn't know, and now I know what I don't know, like what are the aspects that I could learn on. And now when I look at people around me, right, there's so many people who are doing things better than me, like you, like you literally are better at managing chaos than I was. So looking at all of these things, this a lot of people lack, like a lot of teenage businessmen, like a lot of people, they lack that. So they don't put in efforts into learning the craft. So you, right, like you are doing mechanical engineering, and right, you're doing mechanical engineering, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so you're doing
Yeah,
mechanical
I am.
engineering, and Consumer is a software based company where you're working with a lot of people from a software engineering field, and there is artificial intelligence involved. So initially when we started also, like initially when I was part of Consumer, there are so many things that you didn't know, but you put in efforts into like knowing little bit about that so that you can have conversation with people who know that, so that like the resources, like with whomever you want to work, right, like you need to know something about that. So you were always like had your eye open about learning and uh like seeing what you don't know. So yeah, I think clearly that helped you like be better at what you do.
So when it comes to learning, right, I think there's one thing which people misunderstand a lot of the times. People think learning can happen only in courses or in college or education. In fact, I mean, like you said, right, I have built AI systems while being a mechanical graduate, where I should not have any business doing that. It's because it's not just a degree or just a college or just the course you do that defines. I mean, I didn't do any course in AI. It's like, it's about learning. And today, I think a lot of the top entrepreneurs that will tell you, right? Elon Musk will tell you, Bill Gates will tell you, Steve Jobs will tell you that what advantage we have today is the information availability. 20 years ago, if you wanted to learn something, you either need to find a library or have rich parents to go buy the book or have some sort of a mentor who can tell you that. But today, for me to learn something, it's as quick as a Google search. And I feel, right, one major advantage everyone can solve everything given enough time. You just need to have the time and the mindset to learn that. Again, no one knows everything when they start out. I mean, I can guarantee you, even the top guys out there, they don't start off by knowing everything. They probably have some skills that they're very exceptional at, but that isn't enough. Like you said, you have so many domains to work around it. So learning is a necessity. I think people learn forever. One important thing when you said about confidence, even you were more confident before than now, right? There's an interesting chart I saw. Again, no credits to me. I found it online. Was that there's a chart between confidence and knowledge, right? X-axis, y-axis confidence, x-axis knowledge. Now, at the beginning, people who don't know anything and don't have any knowledge, basically have lowest confidence. People who know a little bit, right? They have minimal knowledge. They have the highest confidence because they know only a little bit and they think that I know everything. Then when they learn more and more, right, the geniuses, they realize that they don't know enough. And that confidence again goes down. So if you go ask the smartest people, they are not the ones who will tell you I know everything. Because if they feel they know everything, they don't, right? And that component of not knowing what you don't know, I don't think people realize that enough, that is such a variable. Right? It can boost up your anxiety like crazy when you grasp the fact that there are things out there that I don't even know I don't know. Now that will always be there. It's about having the confidence, right? That or having the principle that I am going to be there in this situation. It's just me. Right? You can figure out when you get there. And this is again some in theory. There's a principle in I've got the theory portion, but there's something where it says a pilot in the plane principle. What that means is that regardless of the conditions outside, there's so many variables you can't control. End of the day, plane is in your hands. It's in your hands. You should trust yourself that if some new unknown situation comes to you, which you didn't even know you don't know, you should be having the confidence to deal with it. Or you should be able to learn something to deal with it at that point. So the confidence in yourself is what matters. And that's how you can, figure out your way around most of the challenges out there, hopefully.
Yeah. So when you started Consumer, you were 19 years old, right? Like the start
Yep.
of where it all began. So what drove you into starting this? Because you were 19 years old, and I know what 19-year-olds do normally, and like what they think, like what their priorities are. And you started out at a very young age, which I mean that's what I consider young at least. So like what drove you to like start Consumer at like 19 years old?
So going back, right, I think 19, I was in 2020, last year itself, 2020, summer. So I've always wanted to look into entrepreneurship, right? I never thought I'll get into it this early. I always wanted to get into entrepreneurship, but the ideal cycle would be that you study, do a master's, do some mad job experience, work at startups, and then understand everything. And then once I know enough, take the leap. That is, the ideal scenario, which obviously as at that point of time, thinking about it, it made sense. But fact remains that from beginning, I wanted to be an entrepreneur and be in a position of entrepreneurship where I have control over a lot of things and I can make that sort of an impact on something. So that's the basic idea I had, from a long time before, right? But what happened is in summer of 2020, COVID pandemic, there was something called the COVID-19 India project, which I was a part of, where it was a volunteer-driven organization. We had like lots of volunteers, amazing people. And we worked on basically, you would have heard of the website covid19india.org, where all the statistics and data for COVID cases until very recently used to be posted. So we used to aggregate the sources from different areas, and it was a very volunteer-driven effort. Where to the GitHub repo itself, we had thousands of contributors, right? So it was really interesting to spend my time at that point of time there, and that is where an organizational structure, it was very, I wouldn't say it had a structure, but it was fun to contribute to something which had an impact, right? That had an impact on people. Like we were working in the social domain where basically there was a period of misinformation on COVID. There's a lot of false information being spread. The WhatsApp messages which were out were poisoned, they were cancerous. I mean, the messages were going out, right? Clap 9 times and COVID will be gone. Do this, do that. So the problem is a lot of people are gullible to these messages, and a lot of people do not know the truth or do not know which sources to trust. and that is a different problem altogether. But we felt, at least I was working more in the social portion of COVID-19 India, where we had a Twitter and Instagram following, and we were trying to uh, push out the misinformation with real information from WHO, Indian government, health institutes, actual source of information. So what we made is change, and we were getting billions of hits on the website, right? We had a fairly decent reach, where we decided to keep a banner on the web page, banner on the page itself, because people used to check us maybe 3-4 times a day to see how many cases in the country, how many cases in my district, my city, because very interesting start point, right? And the database stuff which the folks in tech have done were brilliant. It was very interesting to see. So we added a simple bar on the top of the a banner on the page, where we kept rolling in a carousel format different basically facts about COVID, and basically efforts of raising awareness, right? Do this, do that. There were other issues which we tried throwing focus on as well, right? Other related and allied issues we wanted to throw on. And then in between, there was the shortage of beds, shortage of essentials when the lockdown prolonged. That is when we started an essentials page. Again, when I say we, I mean the entire collective. I mean the volunteer group as a whole. I wouldn't take too much credit for anything there. But that's when the feeling of working towards something and getting some impact on the output started off, basically, because there was no question about what's your degree, where have you studied from. There's no bar or threshold for you to cross only to be eligible, and there's no one to tell you that this is how we do stuff. It was more or less do it, and when you start working, and that was basically start point. I worked in another organization called TAP for a while as the product lead. I led the product, and I worked with a really good product manager, and that's where the love for products and the entry into the product system started, product ecosystem. I learned a lot about PM, product management, how we work with things, and we actually built a product with a net zero cost almost, right? Apart from the domain, we don't we zero cost at all incurred, and that's where was the first formal that was in a way a startup experience itself, which started on building something great. And we were involved across the board, from the product, from the tech, from the marketing to PR. The entire cycle. We were a small team, and I was heavily involved in that. So soon after these two experiences, I realized that I need to build something. It was I really wanted to build something, and I kid you not, I sat down and I was thinking of ideas. And this, you fellow entrepreneur in a way or two, you would know that. Finding ideas, if you're chasing ideas, you don't find them. If you chase ideas, you never find them. You find ideas when you're not thinking about it only. You're sleeping in middle, you'll get a thought, oh, this is a good idea. So I was chasing ideas for days, and not too many great ideas in that point of time. But one of the ideas I started off, and I tried to found another small startup. I got a couple of my friends on board. I got a few people through different organizations to join, and we started building an app in this period. And that is when, and this was a forced idea, but it was a decent idea. It was not a bad idea. It was a good idea. At least, I would say that, right? So I took that forward. We were building stuff. Obviously, only happened because everything was remote, right? We had a lot more time on our hands than usual. So I had to spend it, and it was fun to start building that. But I remember there was a week where there were exams and there was a lot of chaos, and I came across a real problem there. Well, I was not looking for a problem, and I already had a problem to solve. And that was that community marketplaces was something I wanted to build. The problem which I found was that I live in a fairly decent, large neighborhood. A lot of people here, a lot of people live here, and there are a lot of sellers here. Because of COVID, a lot of people lost their jobs, which meant that they relied on this secondary source of income a lot more. All the cottage industry type of stuff, right? Where people make handbags, toys, art, small food, and sell within the community. These guys aren't Amazon sellers. They aren't the scale of large scale brands. They aren't the scale of that, but they have home-based businesses which they realize that they can make an income. And around this time, the sentiment of community also kind of peaked, that let me help my neighborhood, let me help my people. So I felt that there was a need for some sort of a hyper-local Amazon in a way, which is basically like having your e-com store for a small region, location-based e-com store. So let's say you live in a neighborhood in Mumbai, only that neighborhood, all the local sellers will be promoted. So because in Amazon, they would have to compete with, let's say, millions of other sellers without, you can't compete there. But I was hoping that in a neighborhood environment, people would have, favor that community sentiment enough to say that I will buy from my community, but not from. This is a problem actually. Thanks to my mother, I came across this problem because she's in all these WhatsApp groups, and she told me, "Abhi, why don't you do that?" And I was like, "That sounds like a good idea." I dove through the WhatsApp chats, realized that there are a lot of people here. Spoke to a few people and realized that, and you know me, right? I jump into things as fast as I can. I believe in doing, not just thinking. So I built a very small website, use some third-party sources, all of this, built something and built a platform. And we tried to do an MVP structure where I basically had, we onboarded a lot of sellers. And I was planning on, I was basically the WhatsApp connecting the seller to the buyer. Right? He will send me, I will get an order. I'll send a WhatsApp message to the seller that you have an order. Seller says, okay, I will place it this time. And I was the human WhatsApp in between. And when this was happening, what happened is we onboarded sellers in one community and we got about 100 plus sellers, which was crazy. But the volume of purchases wasn't there. And we were facing few issues with, you have a supply but don't have a demand for it. And a very important question of when you're in this middleman economy, important metric is your GMV, which is gross merchandise value of the product. It means how much volume of products or value of products is flowing through your platform on a daily basis. Because if you are to take a cut, right, a transaction fee or 1, 2, 3%, it is a percent of this volume which is going through. And we just didn't have enough volume for the numbers to make sense. And the core concept itself was flawed because I over anticipated or over exaggerated or over expected the demand or the value of community in terms of these purchases. One was of course the purchase itself weren't frequent purchases. Even the people who want to buy from the community, it's not like I buy artwork or I buy vases every day. It's not like so they're not fast moving items. And for the ones which are fast moving, people would much rather go to Amazon and buy it there. Like no one wants to buy a water bottle for regular use from their neighbor when they can get it cheaper and faster from Amazon. So this became the biggest problem I faced. We had real proof. And around that time, actually, I pitched the same idea to Suresh sir and PVL, Peso Venture Labs. Right? This was around that October timeframe when they got there. So that's where I got into PVL, and we played with the idea. So PVL, as you know, it works as more of a idea-based or concept-based fund, which is perfect because they don't expect you to stick with the first idea that comes in. We develop the idea till we get it right and get it ready to be funded to the next round. So thanks to the support, we were able to ideate a little bit more. And we came, while working on this, we worked on different proposals, trial at the door, refunds, reverse logistics. We tried different concepts, but we were moving further and further away from the initial concept which I had. So we then looked at the next thing, right? This is another idea in my head from a long time, was how market research wasn't much what do I say disrupted by tech. No, it wasn't disrupted by tech.
Okay.
So I tried to find a way to disrupt market research, because market research from years has been the same. People haven't used technology as much as they should have. So we started with that. We, as you know, built the idea, went to market, spoke to a lot of people, and with feedback and building, these iterations have led to what we are today. And there's nothing to say we might not iterate again, right? But the core concept of this was that we need to find a way to get you insights, to find you value from using tech. And that's how we came across what we are today.
Yeah. Isn't this so crazy,
Very long.
right? Like from where you started, it seems pretty quick to me. Like since when you started to like what you worked on, right? Like it seems like you've figured out your way of doing things faster. So when you started, it was not much long, right? It was probably like 1-2 years back. But like when you started, you might have been slightly all over the place with respect to how you were working. But then slowly you learned how to hold on to ropes, right? Like you figured out like jugaad, like this is what mental jugaad basically, like your way of organizing things in your head so that you function better. And initially, when before we started recording this podcast, we were talking about the fossil fuels and those problems, right? Like just to add that here, it's when you see a problem, right, like you saw a problem and you try to tackle it, and everybody in this entire world, when it comes to entrepreneurship, they're like, you know what, you should solve a problem, like that's been like the buzzword, right? Solving the problem. But sometimes the problem is so multidimensional, and it is hard to understand what is causing the problem. So we were talking about fossil fuels, right? Like how everybody is saying, you know what, like we need to stop using fossil fuels, we need to move to like solar or other sources of energy which is much more sustainable, and everybody is putting efforts into moving into that direction. And like what you said earlier, right, like it made 100% sense. So like fossil fuel, like that is not the core problem, like we like it being like like fossil fuels having an expiry date is not the actual problem, right?
Right, right. So to elaborate on that, right? So what basically I was learning and studying again, not the expert on this subject by any breadth of the imagination at all, but so what I learned is that I think from very young age, first, second, third standard itself, we are taught in EVS classes that fossil fuels are bad because they're running out. We don't have enough fossil fuels, and theoretically it makes sense when you think about it because it takes millions of years to millions or thousands of years to form fossil fuels, which makes sense that okay, that means we are using it so fast that we might not have it for the next million years. Next generations will not have these fuels, and there are predictions that come up that yeah, 50 years will be out, 100 years they've been out. These predictions have been they keep coming out. So one of the major reasons why people say fossil fuels are non-renewable source of energy, right? You cannot renew them in a meaningful time frame. That seems to be the focus around the narrative of fossil fuels are bad. Whereas the real reason, and coming to the real reason, before the real reason, to kind of bust this myth, right? And everyone, I mean, if you're watching this and you disagree, I'm open to learn and open to understand it even further if you have, more valid points. But what I understood is that fossil fuel availability or shortage is not the problem. It's not a supply problem here. And I'll give you a very simple example to demonstrate, right? Think of it this way: the Earth itself is a ball of energy, and the simple principle which you're always taught is energy can neither be created nor destroyed, right? Now, if you take the Earth as a system and there is energy imparted into the system, and we don't lose too much energy to the universe or we ignore that portion, imagine the amount of energy that's contained in the Earth itself already, which is available for use. The magnitude is so much compared to the negligible amount that we use in just theory, thinking from a very abstracted point of view. But coming to more factual basis, right? Between 2011 to 2013, around 2011, there were a lot of people saying that US's oil reserves will fall. There are not enough oil resources, etc. What happened is that's when they found something called shale oil, shale gas. Shale gas is something which is a natural gas which is found below shale rocks, and this was always there. I mean, everyone knows this as a potential reserve of fossil fuel, but nobody could crack the problem of how do we extract the shale, extract oil. Mainly because shale is too impermeable, so it's not easy to crack it open and extract the gas economically. But what people found, and there were new technological advancements there in, I think there was hydraulic fracturing or horizontal drilling. These are two techniques that they came up with technologically to extract this gas at a very, economically viable rate. Now, when they did this, almost 33% increase just in 2 years, 33% increase in the oil reserves, oil and gas reserves of the US in just 2 years, right? This is basically the point is that today, what shortage we see is what are the most easily accessible extractable resources. But as you know, with time, I mean, there are a lot of resources. A couple of resources I'll give you are something called gas hydrates, and there are some stuff with shale oil, and there are certain other ultra heavy oil, right? Ultra heavy oil basically is a type of petroleum or a type of oil which is extremely viscous, extremely high specific gravity, high specific density. So it can't be extracted very easily, but doesn't mean it can't be extracted. In fact, people say that that resource on its own, ultra heavy oil, on its own can be increasing our coverage or our reserves several fold. That means multiple 100% increases. Which means if someone gives us 50 years for the current source to run out, that means this can increase that to another 500 years. I mean, 10 times 500 years you can take into consideration. Gas hydrates on the same way are extremely available. So the problem is not availability of oil, availability of petroleum, availability of fossil fuel. Because I mean, from what I've learned, I feel that you can always access more and more petroleum, more and more fuel. Obviously, there will be an end to it at some point, but we are nowhere near the last 10% or last 20% of that consumption in the first place. Second place is that why people can ask, right? Okay, if there's so much, why are we struggling today? Why are the prices so high? Why what is happening? The problem is more about the willingness to crack that problem. The US cracked the shale oil problem or shale gas problem only when they realized that there's a shortage in their current and ONG system. That is the only time when they realized that let us spend some money on R&D to figure out new methods to solve this. So if you can solve a complex problem like that, solving problems like these, I feel that as humans in the current age, at least, we are lucky enough that we have the brains and the capacity and the money and the willingness to solve whatever problem is posed to us. I mean, we have solved. Elon has solved going to Mars, right? We can figure out a lot of the things which we need to be done. But coming to this, right? So there are resources are there. There are obviously that small leap you need to make from practicality, from theory to practicality, which is going to be bridged by technology, right? Technology and figuring out, getting your best minds working on it. I feel 100% you can crack those problems. So the problem is not availability. I think that is something we can establish. But the real problem, which we come to now, is more about the usage, the transport, and the extraction, and how these three contribute to pollution. Right? If there's something which is very irreversible or non-renewable, it's the environment. Right? Once you screw up the ozone layer, the technology or the investment required to fix that would be much, much worse or much, much higher than what is to solve the other supply side problems. So let's go to simple problems, right? From extraction. What are the basic principles or standards you face when you extract these oils? From a humanitarian point of view, you've heard of families being displaced just for an oil pipeline or just to drill and get it. So it starts from extraction and production itself to transport. Oil spills you would have heard of, different sort of poisoning, water poisoning, water body poisoning, stuff like that. That's transport problems. And the biggest problem today is the pollution by usage of fossil fuels. Now, like fossil fuels, the easiest way to use it is by combustion. You burn it, get some heat generated, convert that heat into something useful. Now, when you combust, you know that there is a lot of emissions out there, a lot of harmful toxins, gases which are exposed to the environment. The biggest problem today is that. And one good point you made when we discussed earlier was that solving this entire problem, finding the solution to this is not in solar, not in wind, not in thermal. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying that is not solving this problem. That solves a different problem, which we'll come to later. Moving to that, because today we are not having a problem with where the energy is going to come from. We know where the energy is going to come from, right? We can be happy that supply is there. The problem is, are we using this efficiently, effectively, and environmentally friendly? We are not. That is the biggest problem today. Using solar doesn't change the way that you're going to drive to college tomorrow in your Hyundai i10, which is petrol fueled. That will not change it. What will change that is figuring out solutions which are more consumer oriented on emissions, right? We need to find a way to make usage of this fuel a lot more green. If someone can figure out a way, I mean, something simple as catalytic converters, right? Basically, I think it converts a lot of the carbon monoxide emissions into less toxic gases. Let's say. Why aren't these mandatory on every vehicle, or are they? And are we still not able to find a device efficient enough to reduce those emissions? Right.
What the problem is
here.
You know what the problem is? I'm so sorry. I just barged in to what you were
No
saying.
problem. Yeah, go on.
The problem is the topics that we are trying to tackle here, right? Some people are married to that narrative. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, for personally, I believe that this is a bad thing that's coming off social media and any sort of media right now is the narrative that they're selling, right? Everybody wants to be a part of that narrative. So now, if you try to tell this logically, people won't listen to you because they have this an agenda in their mind, and they want to make that the point of their life, like Greta Thunberg, right? Like, what's her name? Greta Thunberg. What's
Greta
her name?
Thunberg.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
So
Thunberg. Yeah.
whatever points that she says, right, they are so emotional, and they don't have any logic in them. Like, this is my personal opinion, okay? Like, though she has no idea of the magnitude of the problem that she's talking about. Like, what is the core problem? How can it be resolved? Like, our entire world's energy, 80%, or like, I think like more than 80% is driven from fossil fuels, right? Now, let's say if we stop using fossil fuels, do you know, like, the world would end, like the innovation, the progress, everything would just like stop. So when
Exactly. So
people
the
say,
narrative you said, right?
hmm,
The narrative you said is not only through social media. In fact, the narrative is fed through us from a schooling and a curriculum point of view.
exactly.
But coming back, right? Like you said, the very important point here is that we are not saying solar and all is bad. I mean, I believe that that is really good. Finding renewable sources, sustainable sources is good. But when we look at fossil fuels, I don't think any of the renewable sources today can take place of the volume of energy consumption we use with fossil fuels. It
People
can never
won't listen
replace
to you
that.
when you say that. I'll tell you why. Like, people will not listen to you when you say that is because global warming, or let's say gender inequality, or let's say gender, like the fluidity of the gender. People pick up certain topics who they like beyond them, and they make that their identity, right? Like, they don't want to change that, and they don't want to listen to the logical reasoning behind the problem, because they want to believe this construct. So the reason why I wanted to say this is that the rational element of analyzing a problem, right, that is missing in our, especially in our
Right.
generation. Because initially you said that there is this graph where people who know nothing will have less confidence, people who know something will have the most confidence, right? I feel our generation with this whole social media, they have very little knowledge, and their confidence is off the charts, like it's overconfidence purely. So the reason why I wanted to bring this in is because we are all in that age, right? Like, we all are being fed that narrative. But like, when you want to solve that problem, when there is money involved, you need to look at so many different attributes that is influencing that particular problem. So, yeah.
Yeah, like you said, approaching the problem, right, is again comes back to your entrepreneurship or your mindset in solving problems. Again, entrepreneurship is nothing but solving problems, right? So when you solve a problem, it's again you need to define the problem so clearly and understand all the variables and degrees of freedom you have and the constraints you have before you can find a right approach to the problem. Solving a problem without having the right knowledge of the problem itself will be very, counterproductive. So again, coming back to solar, right, and why I keep mentioning this is that I feel these are two separate, distinct, divisions we have. Sustainability versus renewability. So sustainability means that it does not harm the ecosystem around it. It has everything it needs for its own production within and doesn't harm the other ecosystem constituents. Whereas renewability means that if I use something, it needs to be used again. It needs to be renewed. Think of it from a tank perspective. You have a tank with an inlet and outlet valve. If you have water flowing in, water flowing out, if the rate of water flowing out is more than rate of water flowing in, obviously at some point tank will empty. Correct? That is your renewability problem, which I completely can get behind. That if I use these resources so fast today that it obviously takes thousands and millions or whatever number of years to regenerate, that means I am pulling out more energy than it has, which I completely agree with, right? Uh, but that is not the problem we can talk about today until, let's say, something like nuclear power becomes more mainstream enough that you can say that renewable power can replace the volume of fossil fuels today. Until we reach that point, I don't think there is a discussion on renewability at all. Until we have a viable substitute, I'm not going to even talk about renewability. What we need to talk about is the millions of cars, millions or billions of vehicles, industries, usage of this and production units of power and fossil fuels, and how we can reduce the emissions, reduce the harmful effects of that,
Hmm.
which I feel we have very smartly diverted the attention from how do I fix my car today to why not change the car only? Because I'm telling you, 70 to 80% of people will not be able to afford itself to change their vehicle altogether to, let's say, an EV or an emission-free vehicle today at any point of time,
Yeah.
right? The people who maybe the next purchase I make might be EV because it's emission free or whatever reason. But today, how are you going to replace? I mean, the replacement is going to be so gradual that it doesn't make a meaningful impact on the world. For you to make an impact and cut down the emissions, it needs to be retrofitting. That means you need some devices that can retrofit on existing hardware, on existing usages of this fuel. Because, for example, a factory's lifespan would, when you build it, when you calculate your capex cost and you factor it out, would be for a minimum of 10, 15 years at least, right? I don't see factories being demolished every 2-3 years. So when you build a factory that is expected to live that long, you need, and vehicles also, I don't see people change it every year, apart, I mean, unless you're very, very into that. So when you have, I mean, the majority is here now problem. You are solving for a future problem or a beautiful idealistic problem that if I get an electric vehicle, it cuts down the emissions, which again, we can get into another long discussion of where if something is electrically powered, emissions are not here. It's just somewhere else, right? That is a different conversation to have. But more importantly, if we can figure out a solution using, and this requires a lot of governmental or regulator support, right? How are you going to enforce this amongst the public? Which could possibly be a potential reason why people are not, that narrative is not being fed, is because the government, expecting a government to push on this would be at a cost of the industry, would be at a cost of a lot. It would probably make a lot of people unhappy, right? But finding a solution which can be retrofitted on existing, let's take a very vehicle, take vehicles alone and isolate that as the problem today. If we can find a device that can cut down emissions in vehicles or improve the emission quality, right? Remove the toxic gases or the CFCs, and retrofit these, sell it as a device and make it mandatory that you need to retrofit, you need to have this or some list of approved devices on your vehicle for you to run.
Companies can have that before the product
Correct.
comes out to the market.
Correct. Yeah, either before you come to a market. I mean, obviously, I think BS6, BS5, BS4, those the stages you have, right? Those are again emission standards itself. There is a standard emission test that happens today, but it is not as efficient as you would want. But yeah, something to do with vehicles, that would be something like a catalytic converter, something which converts emissions into something useful. When you go more large scale into production facilities, onto big towers, big this is where most of the power drain happens and most of the fossil fuel consumption happens. How do you validate it there? In space, for example, people are very nobly trying to go to space, but you do know every SpaceX rocket that goes up, you see the flames which are happening, right? You see the fumes that are coming out. So how do you reduce that? Some of it, obviously you can never remove it altogether. There's always you only reduce, there's never completely remove out of there. But how do you optimize that there in such a way there where technology is possible and affordable? You make sure to cut down on these side effects of fossil fuel consumption. That is the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
People are very, very well misguided, that, okay, solar will solve it. And you tell me, right, how will solar solve the problem of my car? You've seen autos in Bangalore. How will solar solve the problem of those black gas coming from the autos on the roads? Solar will never solve that problem.
On them. Like for them to move to something like that, right? The initial change cost,
inertia itself.
Yeah, like it's super. It's super hard. Another thing about problem, right? It's the longevity of the problem. Like whatever problem that you're trying to tackle, few years down the line, will that be relevant? Because technology is growing so rapidly, and like whatever problem that you choose, will the growing technology will solve it quicker than you expect it. So then your problem has no
exactly. So an
relevance,
example there, it's really, really good point. I think you came to the exact correct point there. That from my understanding, nuclear power, the volume of power generated by a nuclear power plant is far exceeds your thermal plants and whatever other power plants you have. So in terms of volume itself, and I'm not going to touch upon Chernobyl and your different side effects of nuclear power and those power plants and leakage and radiations, which again I can't comment on without knowing more. The nuclear power plants will be a potential solution if technology can figure out a way to make them safe, if not already. That solves the problem at a vast scale and a lot better scale than solar does or than wind does, right? These are, so you're solving something which, again, I'm nothing against these power types and renewable types at all. I think very, very important, because like I told you in the beginning, right, the theoretical approach of Earth as a system, all energy just changes from one form to another. So when we are changing energy from one form to, let's say, wind form, we need to be able to harness that power back. It's just that these are very small percentage point improvements, whereas the larger improvement we can see in our environment will be more from a better consumption. So see, it's never a single problem you solve. There are always 5-10 different problems you are solving. I mean, you don't know that always one problem statement can cover it, right? I can cover all of human problems in one line, that humanity's, let's say, human poverty, which then comes under thousands of different sub problems, right? So it's difficult to isolate that specific problem statement that you are solving for. But to do that, right, what problem to choose itself is a decision you make in the beginning. And that problem needs to, how do you choose a problem? It should be the one which has the most impact, right, out there. And this I'm talking more from a global perspective than just a company perspective. So which problem out of these 5 problems has the most impact? Does renewability as a problem have the most impact, or does cutting emissions have a more larger impact onto your larger statement of sustainability, right? Both of them definitely have impact, but what should we focus more on, right? That is the question which I feel, honestly, from a volume perspective and from the numbers I have seen, that focusing on cutting down and retrofitting and figuring out what's happening now with fossil, and like you say, 80%, is a lot more better than focusing on the 20% problems of solar and wind and whatever other problems we have, which I'm pretty sure we have the best minds working on that. So it's more of, I mean, I don't know what the technological advancements are in all these areas, but as a public opinion perspective, we should stop just purchasing the narrative of this is the only good thing. There could be something better which has a bigger impact, which we need to focus on. It might not be as as buzzwordy or as trendy as what you have, but that is a better solution. I mean, you tell me, right, a catalytic converter or an emission thing is not as beautiful as a solar panel or piezoelectric sensors, I think. So an example, 2012 London Olympics, they implemented something called piezoelectrics. Piezoelectrics is basically crystals where it converts mechanical pressure into electricity. So if you walk, right, their branding was that you're going to walk on our footpaths to the stadium, and we'll generate power for the stadium from the footpaths, right? This was one of the use cases there, which is, again, that sounds amazing, but ask them what volume of power they could extract from that. Right. So coming back, it's
how many tube lights were you guys able to light?
So again, I mean, I'm pretty sure it did a good job because they had a very large volume of people walking to their events, which is, again, noble idea. But again, that will not be as beautiful. I mean, that will nothing like, I mean, the stuff which have a bigger impact aren't as beautiful, and people don't want to, subscribe to that narrative because it's not nice. It's not trendy when I put it on my story, right? Whereas this Olympic thing makes a great story any time of the day.
Yeah. To give a perfect analogy, right? Like, let's say if there is a tank and there is a hole and the tank is leaking, everybody are thinking about buying a new tank and replacing it rather than closing that hole first. So like everybody is thinking about the future, and like everybody wants to do that, but they are leaving this one behind. Like they're not trying to
The
bridge
current
this.
itself.
There are two section. One is future and one is present or past, but there is no smoother segue to that. Like nobody's trying to patch that hole. They just want to change the tank, but then in the meanwhile the water is leaking, right?
Correct.
So
Exactly. That's a very good example.
another point that hit me was, like, I was listening to this podcast where they were talking about this, like, renewable sources, fossil fuels, and that in that he says, uh do like when you take 1980s or like back then when like cars came out, right, the mileage of the cars was very bad. Like they used to use a lot of fuel, but over the period of time the efficiency of how we use fuel has increased. So we like the vehicle's mileage is increased, the amount of fuel that they need to run for certain distance is also significantly reducing. So as the renewable sources like the fossil fuels, as they are running out, we are also efficiently designing technology which is complementing that. Like we're not just like using things we are also like moving that, and people completely lost track of this coordinate and how things are moving in that direction. Like, how is technology affecting that, like the renewable source and the fossil fuels? This narrative of fossil fuels has been pushed down our throat from decades. Ever since I was a kid, they're like, oh, global warming. Bro, global warming was scaring the shit out of us when we were kids. But now we are entering adulthood, and like now there are very slight impacts of like global warming. Like, I might get a lot of hate for this, but people are exaggerating global warming. I'm not disagreeing that there is no global warming, but like, it's like, if you're walking and if you just fall down, and people say it's because of global warming. Like, there are a lot of natural calamities that would have happened any which ways, and now you're linking that to global warming, right? Like, like that narrative, everybody is just like,
Get it? Yeah.
so that's another
Yeah.
problem that
So again, global warming is one different topic. Again, see, the thing is, if I don't have knowledge on something enough, right? If I don't study it enough, I don't feel comfortable even mentioning left or right, right? I'm pretty sure the people who talk about global warming would have done a lot more research than I have sitting here, because I have, you also would have done a lot more than I have, because I haven't looked into that itself at all. In fact, what I specifically looked at is that, I mean, we are definitely not in a very beautiful place today. Okay, there's a lot of issues with, and global warming could be one of the symptoms of, or one of the diseases due to because of this emissions and different type of fossil fuel usage. Which again, right, my point is that when we are solving that problem, the approach to the problem needs to be right, and we need to I mean, and I say we again, I'm not talking from a researcher or from big co talking about it, or government talking about it. I'm talking about more from us as individuals when we look at the future of ourselves and our humanity, right? When we look at problems and when we realize and decide what is good, what is not, um, I feel we need to focus a bit more. I mean, once we have enough knowledge, of course, need to focus a bit more on understanding how to cut and fix what we have broken already, before we look at huge fixes. Right? Let's first fix the most impactful things that we can fix today, because like I gave an example, electric vehicles can never take over the market in terms of the size of vehicle. Let's say India itself, right? India might be one of the largest markets for vehicles, and it probably isn't the largest, but India, China, and all have a good large amount of volume of population and vehicle usage, two-wheeler usage, auto usage. Now, we can never replace all of this within the next 5 years. I don't see India replacing all my cars by EVs. I don't even see US replacing everything by EVs in 5 years, right? The more short-term solution, but a converter or an emission control can be implemented in 5 years. So while people are working on longer term solutions, which I'm not saying stop by any means, I'm saying let's give a little more attention, a little more focus, a little more push and support to short term, high impact fixes. We need to look at the short term also.
to
You are
stop the
thinking about your
bleeding.
kids. Correct. You're thinking about your kids. What about you, right? You also need to live. So we need to stop romanticizing long-term fixes and look at what can we do in the next 10 days. So water shortage, what can we do now to fix that? Right? Water pollution. A simple fix was in every lake when the sewage is entering the lake. The Japanese have implemented this. Is put a net, and a net. That's all. A fisherman's net you have, a low cost, very very small cost, $100 net, can save so much pollution from entering the lake. Right? People are thinking, how do I solve sewage problem? I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll put regulations, I'll use the water which I'm. That's not the solution. Simple. I mean, our ancestors have always done it well, right? Very simple. Have you seen roadside drains? They have been here since the beginning of time. The solution would have been very simple, to keep a net so that the plastics and all get stuck in the net. Of course, this is a very simple example. There are lots of dimensions to that, like the plastic itself can block the water flow, different ways to solve it. But why don't we look at that? Because that isn't beautiful. But in Vartur, they dig up the entire lake, redo the entire bed, remove the entire water, and pour it back in, while not solving the source itself, where the bad water is coming from, chemicals are coming from itself. So today that fixes, tomorrow it doesn't. So We need to stop doing these long-term high investment fixes. Try and find out, spend the same amount of time, effort, and money on something which can retrofit and improve today's conditions itself. That will have a larger impact, at least in the short term, in my opinion.
Yeah. It completely makes sense, whatever you're saying. And that is the reason why I love talking to you, is because when I look around people, right, like when I talk to them, the priorities of what they want to do with their life and like how they think about finance and money are completely different. So, like, everybody wants to, like, when they start a business, right? More than the problem, their fascination of how they're gonna be when this business becomes successful, or like what sort of lifestyle they're gonna have when this business becomes successful, is the primary motto. Like, that's why a lot of people are navigating towards like Bitcoin, or like, sorry, cryptocurrency, and the NFTs and all of that, right? I like, initially when I thought of Bitcoin, I thought that, like, I actually, there is a clip on YouTube where I talk about that, like Bitcoin and like everything is just a fad, like people are just like going behind it, and very few people know the fundamentals of how Bitcoin works or like what blockchain is. I stick by that statement even now, but my views on Bitcoin and like the blockchain is completely changing because the I am reading slightly more about that, like I'm learning a little bit more about that. So my views are changing, but I think not a lot of people give a thought about fundamentals. Like when you're starting up a business, what is the fun, like now as a consumer, your fundamentals, right? Like as a company, what you want to do, what you stand for, like at least even if it's not literally in your subconscious, right? So that's why when you pivot from one step to another, when you take pivots, when your fundamental is strong, the pivot makes sense. If you don't have a foundation, the pivot is just changing ideas. Like, it's not called pivot, it's just
Exactly.
like being all over the place. And so, yeah, like the priorities, fascinate me.
So one thing you said, right? Startups itself. I mean, today startups, luckily or unluckily, in India, have started to become mainstream. We've seen some amazing successes. You've seen success stories with Zomato IPOing. You've seen Paytm, Freecharge, Swiggy, Zomato. You have Cred, Kunal Shah. A lot of these guys have become mainstream. Startups have become mainstream, and it's just obviously a good thing that startups are getting a lot more coverage in mainstream media and in the press, in wide circles, in households especially. Right, people are more open to joining startups now because they see it as a very viable thing. People have made it very beautiful and exciting now. But the downside which it obviously comes with anything becoming mainstream or anything becoming trendy is that you get a lot of low value participators of the trend. And what I mean by that is a lot of people are just want to call themselves a founder, call themselves a startup CEO. Right? I'll make one Instagram page and say I'm the CEO of that page.
In the
Which
bio.
again, nothing against it. Nothing against it. But if your entire motivation of of building something or building a company is so that you can have a LinkedIn page with I'm CEO at so and so company, then I have newsflash for you. You can do that without building anything. You don't need to build anything. Right? Nobody will say you are not. You think of a name, think of a startup, write down you're the CEO of that startup on LinkedIn. No one will question it. But again, that can never be a motivation because that will never sustain the length of a business and the grueling nature of building a business. And you know that, right? And you know how we iterate and the challenges we go through on a day-to-day basis. Again, it's not that we do something great, but we would there's no incentive to continue down the path unless you actually love the problem and love what you're doing. And this is true for anything, right? Anything you do in life, you don't like what you're doing, it is a pain, and you need to get rid of the pain some way or the other. So if your idea is only that destination, tomorrow I will be Elon Musk, I will be Kunal Shah, uh, then newsflash you, it's not that nice and rosy at the beginning, and maybe even throughout the journey. I'll find out soon, right? So if you're not in love with the product, with the problem and with what you're doing, then you won't enjoy the journey. And if you don't enjoy the journey, what fun will the I mean, what's to say you'll even get to the destination?
Yeah.
There's something that drives you in the bad times, right? When you're down and you don't understand anything that's happening, what is it that drives you? If it's just something as superficial as me telling someone I own a startup, then it's very easy to rip that off and say that I am no longer, right? It's very easy to say that I'm going to give up now. But when you are actually passionate about it, you cannot give up because you don't feel like it. I mean, even at your lowest moment, you don't feel like giving up. That's never an option. You're so much in love with it that you're always scratching your head trying to solve the problem rather than figuring out a way to get out of the problem. And the moment, and I give this a very easy example, survival versus thrive. Imagine you're in class, right? And if you don't enjoy the subject, you'll be looking at your watch every moment of time. You're only in class so that at 12:45, when the lunch break bell rings, you can go and meet your friends. If that is your objective, the destination is your objective. That 30 or 45 minutes of class, you're only looking at your watch, waiting for the destination to arrive. But if you actually enjoy what they're learning in class, you won't look at your watch at all. You're actually immersed in that. So then that makes it a lot easier to end up at that period of time, right? So same applies anywhere in life. That from what I have seen so far, it's like, don't do it just because if it's something that's superficial motivating you, there are easier ways to get there. Startups are not easy. If you want to do something like that, you want to own an Instagram page, it is easy. You don't need to build a business. You can start it your own, right? So there are a lot of entrepreneurs. Again, there is no gatekeeping in the entire ecosystem, right? There's nothing saying that you need to do A, B, and C to be considered an entrepreneur. In fact, the more people embrace entrepreneurship, the better for the entire ecosystem, better for everyone. But it's more of a statement to say that when you get into this, have a reason to get into it. Convince yourself of a reason that is valuable enough to get into it, because that is what will drive you through every single day. So that is what I feel, is the spirit of entrepreneurship itself. And again, I talk a lot about it, and I probably am not the best person yet, right? I'm by no means a success yet, and but just from the last whatever experience I have, whatever I've learned, right, and it's like you said, a very short period of time. This is what I kind of feel when I come to talk about this itself.
Yeah. So if you are in a classroom where you're looking at the time for the class to end, change the classroom. Like go sit another class. So there are two things, right? Like you said, either you are focusing on what is happening in the class and you're paying attention for what is being taught to you, or you're looking at the watch for the class to end. And there is only one option, which is you need to be in a class where you're enjoying it. Like, so I don't believe in this concept of, you know what, you have to go through this shit now to have like a paradise later. Like, if you're not having fun now, what gives you the idea that you're gonna have fun later? Like, you don't have proof. It's just that people have created this false hope, to go through their shit. It's the same concept as when you die, you go to
I
heaven.
think more of that. I think more of that, right? Again, what I feel that entire narrative is that it's more of a hope, like you said,
Hmm.
but it's more to get you through the tough times. Because
Yeah.
see, every time you do something, even if you love it to bits, right? I love football amazingly. At some point, I'll be too tired to play. At some point, I'll be down. At that point, uh, that all obviously contributes to your mindset that I want to get there. Right? That's how you think of it when you're down. So I feel it will get better is more of a phase to help you get through tough times than it is your mantra to get through everything. Like if you start college in first year thinking that at the end of college I will get a job, that is the point of college. That is too long a time period for you to be thinking of only that. But if you think of the next 1 month and you think I am going to focus on my studies, get my shit together, and ace my exams, so that what is motivating you in those downtimes will be that okay, today I'll spit till 4 a.m. in the morning so that maybe increase in my GPA leads to a job later. That is more of a destination oriented thinking. But if you start off itself thinking like that, your entire 4 years you're only thinking of that destination. It's not fair on you itself because you're not enjoying it anymore.
Yeah, your
Right?
priorities change,
Tough
right?
times only.
Your priorities change, right?
Correct.
Like when you want to do something few years down the line, maybe next year you don't want that. Like maybe when 5 years down the line you don't want that. Like people really underestimate the concept of do what you love, right? Like people say you need to do what you love. That doesn't mean that it's gonna be all like rose beds in the path. Like I did
Correct.
my bachelor's in design, right? When I finished my 11th and 12th, I had a taste of what engineering could be. Like the subjects and all
Right.
of that. And I hated it. 11th and 12th, I hated it so bad. I didn't enjoy, like it was like torture, like those 2 years, the studying for something that I didn't like. and like the subjects I didn't like, but I had to pass and go through. It was horrible. It was like military training. So I made a decision like I am not doing engineering. So then I thought, okay, what are my other options? Since I know what I don't like, what might I like? So then I got into design, right? You won't believe it. While I was going certain subjects, whatever I was studying, right, I was like, holy shit, I didn't even know that like subjects like this were an actual subjects. Like I was like, okay, wait, this is a class. Like we are sitting and watching a movie and analyzing a movie. I was like, shit, this is a class. So and then when I mean, there were tough times there too because there were timeline. We had to do assignments and all of that. Now I have a job, right? And it is also hard. Like there is stress, like the project that we have, me as a designer also, there are so many things that I have to think about. Like there are timelines. You talk to your employees. There's a mentor, like there's some manager or somebody above you who will be managing your work. It is tough, but I'd rather choose this any day. I don't wait for Sunday, I don't wait for like weekends but to come, because like I don't believe in that concept, and that has helped me immensely. That has really, really helped me. So, yeah, like people, like even though there are a lot of things that you might love, like this podcast, right? Like I'm passionate. This is my passion project. I love talking to people like you, and I do this, but I'm not expecting any money from this. So I need money to live. So I have figured out some other means to make my money from. So like I know what I'm doing what for, but if you're getting money from what you love, good for you. Like that's the best. But majority of the
It's
people,
again same.
yeah, go ahead.
Exactly, a really good point, right? So our conversation now comes from a point of very high privilege, that we are privileged enough or lucky enough that we got the environment and the support and the finances to go and pursue what we want to do, what we love to do. Have the, I mean, if without support, without having this generational effort which comes through, right? It's impossible for us to do that. I mean, there are a lot of people and majority of people who don't have the opportunity or the privilege to go ahead and just do what they like, right? I mean, there are a lot of jobs. I mean, I'm pretty sure people don't like doing, but they do it because they have to. And I mean, it can happen to anyone, right? So it's not that, this is just a very ideal case scenario that we talk about: love what you do what you love, right?
It's
But
not
there are,
ideal, like honestly, right? I thought that like you said, even I was thinking about that. But this is the only way to live your life. Like there is no other way. Let's say I 100% agree with what you said about not everybody has this privilege of doing what they love, but you still need to know what you like to do, so that whatever you're grueling through this, right? Like all, like majority of the parents that I see, like who are 40s and 50s, they got into, like they had to make a living, so they got into like jobs and at a very early age, right? Like in their 20s, and they've been like they work in that company for like decades. If they get a bank, then I'm talking about like our parents generation. So they didn't have the concept of do I like this or not, because they wanted money. So what I'm saying is, you are doing a job to make a living, to make a money. Good for you. You need to do that. But with that, you still need to do something that you love, so that you can create a segue from this to that. Like you will have like it's a plan B of like for a better life.
totally get it. So that's what I didn't let you finish your example there. That's what you were saying with your
Yeah, yeah,
podcast itself, which you're running
yeah.
on the, yeah, makes sense completely. Yeah. So there was that one more thing, right, in terms of marketing I wanted to share, with which that I felt is a little close to this thing. So I love watching F1 and football. And in fact, I played in a lot of youth leagues at different levels in India. And it was really fun. I mean, I was in the, I won't say professional, but at least academy ecosystem, and when I was in the youth phase. And that time the
Youth
dream
phase.
was,
So what phase are you in now?
for a footballer, I'm old. For a footballer, I'm old. If
Bro,
you're
are you
19 and you
kidding
play now,
me?
no, you don't. So the football system, right? If you're not identified when you're 14, 15, or 16, you're already old. You're too old to get into it profitably. You need to be in the system from, I mean, that's India. Abroad in Europe and UK, if you're not in this, I mean, top players have been in the system from their under 10s, below 10. You've seen Messi play when he was 6 and 7. So this is something which, again, leave that portion out. It's more like, so with this, I became very fond of Indian football. And there are not many people in India who are fond of Indian football. There are a very sizable number, of course, because we have a very large population. But there are a lot of people who follow football, but not Indian football, right? And for their own reasons. The football may be bad. They don't have superstars. Timings are bad. There are different reasons. So doing this and watching F1, I found one really interesting parallel, right? So F1 very recently, a few years back, was taken over by Liberty Media, which is a company which were basically bought over the entire F1 franchise. So F1, their growth and their marketing strategy itself changed. And I won't go into the details of the overall changes in the structure, but one interesting point which I found that changed a lot was how content sharing was not gatekept anymore. And what I mean by this is today, and I'll draw the parallel to ISL, which is the Premier Indian League, which has great amount of investment from the Ambanis, from FSGL, from abroad, and also great amount of blitz and show and gala, around the entire thing to make football the next trendy thing, right? So when this is happening in F1, they had one major shift in terms of sharing content on social. Right? Today, most of the conversations we have around sports, around music, around passions, exist on social media. Whether it's on Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, it happens on social media. That's where the organic conversations happen between fans. And that is where, in fact, you get into touch with another sport. So, for example, I didn't get into F1 until recently, a few years back. And the only reason and even though my friends kept pushing me, watch F1, I was never in the mood to watch it until I started consuming some content online on F1. Right, on Twitter, I found a few videos of a few F1 races, and I was very interested. And this content came to me from some sort of a connect, a very loose link, and then that content popped up on my feed. It got me on board. It hooked me, and as soon as that content hooked me, I started to watch more and more and more, get into it deeper. In fact, there's a Netflix series called Drive to Survive, which is completely based on F1. And even though that might not be an accurate representation, you ask a true F1 fan, they'll laugh you out of the room if you say that's how you started. That is a very great tool for them to extract the mainstream audience into it. Now, in ISL, what happens is that there is a very strong copyright rule on the content produced. So Star Sports, right? Star as a media company itself, I think they part own FSGL, they part own ISL, or they one of the top sponsors there, and they're obviously the broadcasting partners, which means that they bought the broadcast rights for a huge amount of money, so they broadcast the show. So totally fair to them. They don't want to showcase. They don't want to let unauthorized people showcase the match, which makes sense, right? So that is true. But sharing of content, right? Let's say yesterday, my favorite team scored a crazy goal. I want to reshare that content. I want to reshare it so that people in my following also see. I want to share it so that other people also see. Today, it's not happening. You'll get struck down by a copyright claim within seconds. In fact, my F1 journey started when I watched YouTube compilations of the best races, right? And compilations are basically, they take out the best moments from different feeds itself. Now you use one real Star Sports feed in any of your Indian sport compilations, you are out. And copyright strikes you within faster than lightning. You will get stuck by copyright. Now, a lot of the content creators I have seen around Indian football, because I like Indian football, right? I'm looking for this content. I can't find good enough quality video content because Star has probably made this impossible to do. And great kudos that their copyright team works that well. But what they are forgetting and missing out is that today my only source of content is a centralized Indian Super League website, Twitter handle, social media, maybe the Star Sports Twitter handle, social media. But these already have set followings, right? This already has a following. This already has a following. What doesn't have a following? So when you decentralize content creation, when you allow content creators to create content with your content without asking them to pay you, without asking them to incentivize it, I share something. Hundreds others like me share something. You suddenly have an explosion of sorts where content is going to places where this network could not reach. People who follow Indian Super League already know about Indian Super League.
Yeah.
Right? You are not, and the content you get here is again for a very broad mainstream audience. what about the niches you're missing out on? Within this itself, you're missing out on a lot of niches. I am looking for tactical analysis. And I don't like the tactical analysis the ISL dudes do because they water it down a lot for the general public. I want to look at a very nice tactical analysis, like the level of, let's say, Monday Night Football that
From
they
a
do.
technical standpoint.
Technical standpoint. Some people want to look at the drama around the sport. Some people want to watch the best goals, best tackles. Now, there are some content that comes out from this, but this network is closed. I already know about ISL. How do they reach the people who don't know about ISL? How do they hook them? Unless you're sharing this content out, right? My friends who don't watch ISL and they watch Premier League and the other sports, they don't have an opportunity to get hooked. Unless I physically send them the post of that other page, they organically never have an opportunity to get hooked into Indian football. And there was a, you're bridging the gap with, let's say, stadium experiences, which really helped. A lot of my friends came to a BFC match and they got hooked to the atmosphere, which is why they follow the sport. But in terms of the content, I feel honestly, Indian football has improved several fold. And in the past few weeks, I've joked with my friends that Indian football is more attractive than the football Manchester United was playing, right, under the last management. So it was true because the quality of football, which used to be the biggest headache with people, right? There's not enough good quality in India. Why will I watch an Indian dude try to dribble and fall over the ball when I can watch the stars of their prime on my TV? Today, it's no longer like that. We get so many amazing, talented players in this sport playing amazing football here itself. Again, we are nowhere comparison to that, but it's not as bad as it was before.
Yeah.
But if you don't let people showcase that, how will others know, right? That is one thing F1 did a really, it's a masterstroke there that they played, where they allowed people to share, create content with the original feed itself without a threat of copyright strikes, without a threat of taking it down, which helps a lot of non-fans become fans, and it helps improve the fans' current hook and engagement to that product. That I need to be so tangibly hooked to that I don't want to leave. So today, right, a lot of the fans who were hooked to BFC are slowly loosening out. Why? Because all that halla bol they did around it has died down the last few seasons because of the pandemic. Whereas F1 interest has increased during the pandemic. How? Because social. So having drawing this parallel, I feel allowing content to be shared from an event and the extra people it can hook in is a higher economic gain than the cost of letting your broadcast go to different people. Your live broadcast can still stay in the same place, but the benefit you're getting of decentralizing content sharing is a lot more and hopefully a lot higher than the cost you're going to incur, right, by allowing them to share it. So let's say the biggest headache would be that I have bought this video, right? Why should I let Sankarshan play it on his YouTube channel to his 1,000 followers? He will get the money. But when you look at Star India and Sankarshan, right, these are two different scales, right? If I am a football fan and Star India has tens of millions of people who watch the game, but I'm a football fan I am catering to my 1,000 loyal followers who like my niche. He should never get threatened by the amount of money I am making because it's peanuts compared to him. But if I get 1,000 more people to join the Indian ISL fraternity, that is a lot larger value to him than the opportunity cost of losing the content here. You get the type of economics.
You know what the bigger picture here is? It's like I understand the standpoint that you're coming from, but thinking from a global standpoint or from a bigger picture, it's more of decentralizing things, and like few years back when, let's say, you have a startup idea, people are very hesitant to discuss with other people because they might steal your idea, right? So I think that inherently stopped a lot of people from progressing. The way how me and you met was through collaboration, right? Like, had if you thought that, you know what, like, I'll hire somebody as a permanent employee, or like I don't want to discuss a lot of things with him, or like he might steal my idea. I mean, though that is possible, you still there are ways where you can secure that and still make things accessible, right? You can still discuss. The core is collaboration. We all need to grow together. It's not about like one person growing it. So that's where I think the Indian Football League, like that, I think that's where it failed, because they stopped the element of collaboration. When it comes to building community, right, the major concept is collaboration. That's when
Correct.
community builds around it. And football, or like any company that you see that builds a huge community around it, there is a collaboration that comes like in and out. Like when you see Netflix, it collaborates with YouTubers to create content for
Correct.
them. So there are a lot of YouTubers who I didn't know existed, and I found them through Netflix. And there are a lot of YouTubers that I like. If they are doing something with Netflix, I get curious. Oh, what are they doing? So in a
Yeah.
sense, this concept, right, like people need to hop on, because you can't do everything, and the sooner you realize it, the better it is for you. And you also need to be
Correct.
smart, like you also need to be smart. Like you can make the other person sign an NDA or something like that, like if you want to share your idea, but you don't have to like restrict yourself from like from other opinions and like other contributions to the idea.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Absolutely. I mean, that's the entire point, right? That like you said, community is like one of the Web3 fundamentals they look at: building communities, DAOs, decentralized organizations. These are all interesting stuff that the world is moving to today. The tech scene, at least, is moving to today. And yeah, like you said, right, it's very important that people understand that uh, obviously there's downside. I mean, I wouldn't say go and tell everyone your entire core tech, right? NDAs, all of that. There's a lot of things to think about in perspective. But coming to a more simpler subsegment of the problem which we were trying to discuss is that if you don't allow it's a simple cost, right? It's a cost analysis you sit down as a Star India guy, and they probably might have done it, who knows, and I'm wrong, which I'm more than happy to be wrong. There is that if you analyze the benefit you're getting from allowing people to share your content, I still feel that would foster. I mean, the tangible is obviously the amount of people he can get, the customer acquisition you can have through that. But the intangible is the happiness of your existing customers itself. Right? How much more hooked am I going to be to it? These are not stuff which you can put metrics or numbers on. It's something which you'll actually see as an effect long term. You'll see attrition. That yeah, people were there, but they're not anymore. So I still feel that if you do an analysis on this, you would come to the conclusion, and I have kind of come to the conclusion that allowing people to share content of a sport is very crucial to having them stick on to that sport. And this is true everywhere around the world. If you don't have content supporting a sport, I don't think people watch it. Apart from the purists who will watch it, regardless of the drama around it. Today's sport is content, right? Sport is nothing but content. And if you don't find a way to see, sport can happen once a week. How can you keep the people engaged the rest of the week? Right? That is where the rest of the content happens. A match is 90 minutes, but they say the experience is forever. That snippets of the match keep getting shared for the next 6 days. And then they prepare for the next match. And then they go to the next match. This content is like an ever complete circle that you shouldn't try and cut short. And if you are the only person doing that circle, that also is not good, because you're again centralizing everything. And let's say I am a BFC fan, and I don't want to see content about Odisha FC. I want to see content about BFC. How are you going to cater to those niches? As a centralized org, you can never cater to the niches there. And striking down people who are catering to the niches, it is probably the most stupid thing you can do. Right? So that's
That's
something
a
which I
really good
felt
point, bro.
strongly about.
That's a really good point about like even though you're creating content for one day, you can keep them engaged for like the retention, the engagement. They'll hold on to you for longer. That's such a good point. Like even with this podcast, right? Like I was thinking about like how do I be more out there, like how do I make people be more engaging and all of that. And one of the thing was this, right, like I wanted to post more, I wanted to be out there more for people
Correct.
to stay connected. And then it's not about the number of episodes that you're releasing out, it's more about are they being engaged until the next episode is out. So I think from
Correct.
from the point that you said, right, this is how I interpreted and how I can apply it into what I am doing. So that's a really, really good point. You know what this reminds me of? Like when you're talking about that collaboration, all of that, right? Have you ever been to Tirupati, the Tirumala?
Yeah, but yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
Tirumala is a spiritual hill station, right? Like there is a god, and
Good.
people usually go there to visit. And I have been there recently, like I think 1 year back when I went there. One of the most fascinating thing that I observed there is the collaboration. Like when you see, right, people don't fight for one prey. They have different opportunities for so that everybody can feed. I mean, talking from like a wildlife perspective, but
Sure.
like literally talking, there are so many auto drivers there, but they don't fight that, you know what, I am gonna take this customer and I am gonna drive him, because they know that like the one guy literally told the other guy that, you know, I've been waiting here from morning, can I go now? Can I take this customer? He said, yeah, yeah, you go, I'll take next. So next time this guy will help him. So there is this one sense of collaboration, and there is one sense of community where things are complementing. They're not contradicting, they're complementing. And if there is this synergy that's there, I don't know if that's because of the spiritual energy there or something, but there is a synergy, you know, like everybody there's a sense of community, there's a sense of peace. So
In fact, I feel that happens only when you have trust. So
mm,
usually, I think humanity as a species, we're hotwired to do that itself. You take the startup community, right? You take PBL as a community itself, right? Us teams help each other very often. You need something, I'll help you. I need something, you'll help me. It's like you said, a very that's how we are. We have been as humans. But usually, what comes along time is some of the other events that break your trust. And as soon as that breaks your trust, you assume the worst on the next instance. So let's say this auto driver example. Let's say this guy was waiting since the morning, or he says so. He takes and you allow him to take the customer, and you find out from another guy that that guy has just made you a fool. He's been sitting, he's already finished 5 6 trips, and he's come for his seventh trip. Now that means that the next time somebody actually honestly tells you something, you would not believe it because somebody already broke your trust on the cycle. So as human beings, the longer we can keep our trust in people, right, longer we can go without breaking each other's trust, the larger this ecosystem works. In fact, I mean, you take the Dogecoin or Bitcoin system, which happens online, you see the ecosystem. People felt Elon Musk was their, godfather of those, coins which were happening. And there was an event, I think, where Elon said some crap and Dogecoin basically nosedive. And everyone started calling for his head. So now the next time Elon spoke, nobody actually, people stopped calling him the godfather, stopped trying to, they lost the trust in that factor that he's going to guide you the right way, which meant that so that breaks a community, right? A community is broken when you don't no longer have trust within the members itself. And discussing and understanding community is a lot more deeper than that. But I feel, at least in these situations, an ecosystem survives when there's trust only. If you don't have a trust, or there are events that break that trust, it's very difficult to get it back.
what a what a beautiful thing to say, man. Like it resonated so much with me, and it completely makes sense, you know. That's the reason why I love talking to you, and that's the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast. Is like, you know, I love to be associated with people like you, you know, to have these conversations. Even you know, this conversation is not some, like, it's not new to us, right? Like we have this offline, and we're just having this with a microphone and we with the
Right,
recording.
right.
But it's more or less the sort of conversation that we have, right? And when I look back in my life, me being associated with this type of people, like people where I can learn from, has been like the impact has been so profound, you know, like in terms of learning, in terms of like like being knowledgeable, in terms of how I can do something better, and like learning things, like looking at how somebody do their work and their work ethic, how do they manage. And like
Right.
personally, right, like I feel that is something that a lot of people are missing out on. Like you associate yourself with people who might be slightly below you, and that might give you an ego boost and you feel superior. And or you want to be alone, or like, you know, there are like different types of people, right? Like people who are
Right.
like narcissists. There are people who like to be alone, like introverts. There are people who are like extremely extroverts. But no matter what type of person you are, this is something that everybody should have. Like they need to associate with people who are growth minded and who want to do something with their life. So
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thanks again. I mean, you've been very kind the entire this thing. But again, like I always say, there's. I mean, I haven't seen enough to speak with confidence on a lot of things, because I believe that half knowledge is worse than no knowledge. If I don't know enough, I'll probably tell you I don't know enough and then tell you my opinion in there. So it's like, yeah, I mean, anyone watching it might think, right, you're just 20, what do you know? And I agree with you. What do I know, man? It's not much. I'm just trying to share what I think I know, what I think I've learned through experiences. And been obviously very happy that you've been kind enough to have me here in the first place itself.
it's I'm glad, man. It's my pleasure. So before we end this podcast, do you have
Mhm.
any advice or like suggestions? Might not be advice, but the things that helped you like be better at like organizing a company, or like be a better CEO, or be a better businessman. Any advice for like people who are listening?
um, I guess the only advice would be that, what we discussed in the beginning, right? Loving what you do. Uh, when you're getting into something, make sure you understand the journey involved, the work involved, and make sure you want to go down the path before you do, right? I think if you make a conscious decision, and this is a very important factor, comes always into almost anything you do, having the right information to make the right decision is the only way you can live at peace with yourself later on. People say I have regrets. The only reason you have regrets is that, oh, I wish I knew this that point of time. So eliminating all of this, having a good understanding of the problem or what you're getting into before you get into it, and making sure you love what you get into, right? I think that's the most important part. The rest of it you learn. There's nothing I can tell you today. Like, I can't tell you go read this book and you will be very good at organizing stuff. In fact, that's something I'm guilty of. I don't read enough books. But what I can say from my experience is that if I work hard enough and I love something, I'll figure out a way to learn. I'll figure out a way to solve that problem. And I have that confidence in myself that if I have the willingness to do something, I will do it. And as long as I like what I do, I'll make sure that I'll figure out a way to do it. So I'm pretty sure that applies to most of us, if not all. It's just that willingness and that passion for something that is very, very important, wherever possible to have.
Definitely, man. One piece of uh, advice that I gave to myself, like this thought just stuck
Mhm.
to me, where this is this is what I think about before I do anything, or if I want to do anything. I always like obsess over, or I get excited about the destination. So if I want to do something, let's say with this podcast, it's very easy for me to get excited. Oh, you know what? Like few years down the line, I'm gonna become like full famous. I'm gonna have this. I'm gonna have that guest. All of that. But what I do is I don't think about the destination. I try to incorporate the part of the destination what might take me there into my behavior.
Makes
So
sense.
I love when I have set certain things in my head that might take me to where I want to go or something. I don't obsess over that into my behaviors. Like if I want to record a podcast. Like initially it was weekly twice, now probably sometimes it might be weekly once, or but record a podcast every week and then put it out. Like that's something that I want to put it like an actionable thing into my behavior. Like if I want to be better at like fitness and get fit, incorporate that, a part of that in my everyday thing. So if I want
Correct.
to get better at my finance, or if I want to do something, I invest part of the money that I make every month into some form of asset. Like I believe in that more than obsessing over the destination. So yeah, this is
Perfect.
piece
Perfect. I
of
think.
this is a
So
piece
again,
of
yeah,
advice I'd say to myself. So
that completely valid. Learn by doing, not by thinking about what will
yeah,
happen.
yeah.
Very true. Very true.
You need actionable things.
Okay.
You need actionable things. Like yes, the destination might be fancy, but what is the first step? Like what do you do? Like what's the actionable thing that's been derived from that? Like I believe more in that.
Correct. That's really good. I mean, that's what got you so far, right? I think
Yeah,
if you just kept dreaming about it, you would never have a podcast. And you'd never have these conversations, and they're really good. And like you told me, right, you love doing these podcasts and love talking to the people you talk to in a different wide a sample of people you speak to, and their opinions, perspectives help you. So even if that dream is not achieved, you are still enjoying what you do today, right?
True.
So that is really good. And again, all the best with your podcast. Hopefully we both make it so big that I can be the big guest on your podcast 4-5 years from now.
True,
Thanks
man.
for again having me, even though I've done possibly nothing notable in my life, right? So really good to speak with you, man.
You're just being humble, man. Like, pleasure's all mine. Yes, let's do this again. I really respect you, and I love the friendship that we have. So I'm pretty sure we're gonna do this again. Probably, like, I don't know when, but we'll do it definitely. And
If I haven't annoyed people who've listened so far, then yes.
sure. Thank you so much, man. Like, it was lovely. I had a
Hey,
great
no
time.
worries, man. Me too, man. I mean, perfect.
A Sankarshan Joshi trip.